The convergence protocols, the emergency council chamber aboard the Zephyrian. Flagship Celestial Dawn buzzed with panicked voices in a dozen different languages. Commander Zara Keth stood at the center of the chaos, her four arms working frantically across multiple control interfaces as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The holographic display showed a terrifying sight, red markers, indicating lost worlds spreading like a plague through the Outer Rim territories. "Another system has gone dark," announced Navigation Officer Ilix, his crystalline form flickering with distress. "The Helix Nebula colonies stopped transmitting 20 minutes ago. That's 12 star systems in the past 4 days." Commander Keth's mandibles clicked in frustration. In her 300 years of service, she had never witnessed anything like this. The Zephyrian Alliance had maintained peace across 47 star systems for over 2 millennia. But now they faced an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The enemy called themselves the Voidborn, though their true nature remained a mystery. They appeared without warning, emerging from the dark spaces between stars in massive, biomechanical ships that defied conventional physics. These vessels moved like living things, pulsing with organic energy while bristling with technology that shouldn't exist. Worst of all, they consumed everything in their path, not just resources or life, but the very essence of worlds themselves, leaving behind empty husks floating in space. "Commander," came a soft voice from the back of the chamber. Dr. Elm Vorax, the expedition's lead xenarchaeologist, stepped forward with obvious hesitation. His species, the Contemplatives, were known for their careful deliberation, making his urgency all the more striking. "I believe I may have found something relevant. On Kepler 442b, the chamber fell silent. Kepler 442b was one of the contested worlds, a planet the Alliance had been excavating for its unusual archaeological sites. Ancient ruins dotted the landscape, clearly the work of an advanced civilization that had vanished long before any current galactic species had achieved spaceflight. "Speak quickly, Doctor," Keth commanded. "We may not have much time before the Voidborn reach this sector." Dr. Vorax activated his personal holoprojector, filling the center of the chamber with images of strange ruins. The structures were unlike anything in the known architectural database, smooth flowing lines that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements. But what caught everyone's attention were the symbols carved into the walls. "These markings appear throughout the ruins," Dr. Vorax explained, his voice gaining confidence. "At first, we thought they were decorative, but our linguistic AI has made a breakthrough. They're not just symbols, they're instructions, complex technical specifications for devices we can barely comprehend." Commander Keth studied the holographic text, her trained military mind trying to parse the implications. Instructions for what? Weapons, systems, shield generators, and something called the Convergence Protocol. Dr. Vorax manipulated the display, showing detailed technical schematics. "The technology described here is centuries ahead of anything in the Alliance database, perhaps millennia." "Who built these ruins?" asked Science Officer Tam, leaning forward with interest. Her people, the Seekers, were driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe. Dr. Vorax hesitated. "Based on carbon dating and stellar positioning calculations, these ruins are approximately 12,000 years old. But here's the strange part. Scattered throughout the sites, we found artifacts that clearly belong to a species we know. Genetic markers, technological components, even what appear to be historical records." The chamber waited in tense silence. Humans, Dr. Vorax said quietly. These ruins were built by humans. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembled officers. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, but they were considered a relatively young species. They had achieved interstellar travel only a few thousand years ago and had maintained a policy of strict isolationism ever since. Their territory, a small cluster of systems around their homeworld called Earth, was heavily defended and completely closed to outsiders. Trade was conducted through intermediaries, and human representatives rarely appeared in galactic politics. That's impossible, protested Navigator Ilix. Humans are practically newcomers to galactic civilization. They don't have the technology or the history for this. Unless, Commander Keth said slowly, her tactical mind working through the implications. We've been wrong about them all along. Before Dr. Vorax could respond, the ship's warning klaxons began blaring. The communications officer, a nervous young Zephyrian named Kix, looked up from her console with wide eyes. Commander, we're receiving distress calls from the Antaran system. The Voidborn have arrived in force. The defense fleets are requesting immediate assistance. Keth's heart sank. The Antaran system housed nearly 12 billion souls across 5 inhabited worlds. If the Voidborn followed their usual pattern, the entire system would be consumed within hours. All ships, prepare for immediate hyperspace jump, she ordered. We're going to make a stand at Antara Prime. As the Celestial Dawn and its escort fleet prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Dr. Vorax remained focused on his archaeological data. Something about the human ruins nagged at him. The convergence protocol kept appearing in the texts, always associated with phrases that roughly translated to Final Guardian and Ancient Vigil. The hyperspace jump took them to the edge of the Antaran system in minutes, but what they found, their defied belief. The Voidborn fleet was massive. Hundreds of their organic ships arranged in a perfect sphere around Antara Prime. The planet's surface was already showing signs of consumption, great scars of darkness spreading across the continents as the Voidborn harvested everything that lived. By the eternal stars, whispered Navigator Ilixluck, look at the size of their flagship. At the center of the Voidborn formation floated a ship that dwarfed everything around it. The vessel was easily the size of a small moon, its surface writhing, with organic growths and pulsing with malevolent energy. As they watched, tendrils of dark matter extended from the flagship toward the planet below, accelerating the consumption process. All ships, attack formation, Commander Keth ordered, though she knew their conventional weapons would be useless. Every engagement with the Voidborn had ended the same way. Complete annihilation of Allied forces with minimal damage to the enemy. That's when Dr. Vorax made his discovery. Commander, he called out urgently, I've found something in the human texts, the convergence protocol. It's not just a weapon system, it's a signal, a call for help. What kind of signal? According to these translations, it's designed to wake up something that's been sleeping. Something that's been waiting for exactly this kind of threat. Dr. Vorax's fingers flew across his interface. The ruins on Kepler 440b aren't just archaeological. Sites their beacons, and I think I know how to activate them. Before Commander Keth could respond, the Voidborn noticed their arrival. The massive flagship began to turn toward them, and smaller attack vessels broke away from the formation. The Alliance fleet was outnumbered 100 to 1. Do it, Keth ordered without hesitation. Whatever this signal is, we need help now. Dr. Vorax transmitted the activation sequence to the ruins on Kepler 4 for 2b, using the ship's most powerful communication array. For a moment, Nothing happened. Then, across the galaxy, something extraordinary began to occur. On worlds that had been considered dead or uninhabited, ancient structures suddenly came to life. Power signatures that had been dormant for millennia began pulsing with renewed energy, and in the deep space between stars, objects that had been mistaken for asteroids or debris began to move with obvious purpose. The first sign that something had changed came from the ship's sensors. Space around the human home system, which had been carefully mapped by long-range scans, was suddenly full of massive energy signatures that hadn't been there moments before. "Commander," reported the sensor operator, her voice filled with awe, "I'm detecting over 3,000 ship signatures emerging from the human territory, and they're moving fast. Faster than anything in our database." But the most shocking development came from Earth's moon. What every galactic survey had identified as a natural satellite suddenly revealed itself to be something else entirely. The moon's surface began to shift and change, revealing itself to be a massive artificial construct. Ancient armor plating retracted to expose weapon systems of unimaginable power, and a pulse of pure energy emanated from its core, a pulse that was felt across the entire galaxy. That pulse carried a message, broadcast in every known language simultaneously. The voice that spoke was calm, measured, and utterly implacable. "The vigil ends. The Guardians wake. All who threaten the children of the galaxy will face judgment." In the Antaran system, the Voidborn flagship suddenly stopped its advance. For the first time since the invasion began, the alien swarm seemed uncertain. Their biomechanical ships began communicating with each other in rapid, urgent bursts of exotic energy. Commander Keth stared at the tactical display in amazement. Whatever the humans had been hiding, it was about to change everything. The eternal vigil, the transformation of Earth's moon, was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, structures that had been mistaken for natural phenomena began revealing their true nature. What astronomers had catalogued as asteroid fields restructured themselves into massive defensive platforms. Nebulae that had seemed empty suddenly blazed with the energy signatures of fleets that defied comprehension. But the most shocking revelation came from humanity itself. The few humans who had served as trade representatives and diplomats throughout the galaxy, individuals who had seemed unremarkable, even primitive compared to other species, began to change before everyone's eyes. Ambassador Marcus Chen, who had been aboard a Zephyrian diplomatic vessel when the crisis began, stood calmly in the ship's central corridor as his human disguise fell away. His eyes blazed with an inner light that seemed to contain the wisdom of eons, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal space. "We had hoped this day would never come," he said to the assembled crew. "We have slept for 12,000 years, watching and waiting, hoping that the children of the galaxy would grow strong enough to protect themselves." Commander Keth, who had been transported to the diplomatic vessel for an emergency council meeting, stared at the transformed human in amazement. "Children of the galaxy. That's what you are to us," Chen replied gently. "Young species, full of potential, deserving of the chance to flourish and grow. We were like you once, before we learned the terrible truth about what lurks in the spaces between galaxies." The holographic display in the center of the corridor activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the known universe. But this map contained information that no galactic database had ever recorded. It showed the positions of hundreds of sleeping human installations scattered across not just their local galaxy group, but dozens of others. "The Voidborn are not native to this galaxy," Chen continued. They come from the void between galactic clusters, feeding on the life force of entire civilizations before moving on to the next feeding ground. They have consumed thousands of galaxies over the past million years. Dr. Vorax, who had been studying the archaeological data, suddenly understood. That's why the ruins are so old. You didn't just build defensive positions, you built them and then went into hiding, waiting for the Voidborn to find this galaxy. Exactly, we are the last survivors of the Andromedae Collective, an alliance of species from the Andromeda Galaxy. The Voidborn consumed our home 2 million years ago, but not before we learned their weaknesses and developed the technology to fight them. Chun's expression grew grim. The cost was everything we were. To become the guardians this galaxy needed, we had to sacrifice our mortality, our individual identities, even our right to live freely among the younger species. On the main tactical display, they could see the battle unfolding in the system. The Voidborn fleet, which had seemed unstoppable, was now facing something they had never encountered before. Human ships emerged from hyperspace around the alien formation. But these were not the small, primitive vessels that other species associated with humanity. These ships were titanic constructs of impossible design. The smallest were the size of battleships, while the largest dwarfed even the Voidborn flagship. They moved through space with a fluid grace that defied physics, their hulls seeming to phase in and out of reality as they maneuvered. The lead human vessel, a massive dreadnought that pulsed with contained stellar energy, opened a communication channel that reached across the galaxy. The voice that spoke was the collective consciousness of humanity itself. Millions of minds joined in perfect unity. Swarm Queen Nethes, the collective voice addressed the Voidborn flagship directly. You have violated the sanctuary protocols. This galaxy is under our protection. The response came as a burst of bioacoustic energy that ship translators struggled to process. When it finally resolved into comprehensible language, the alien voice carried tones of ancient hunger and terrible intelligence. The guardian species, the Swarm Queen hissed, "We thought you extinct. 2 million years we have searched. The void, consuming galaxy after galaxy, seeking any trace of those who dared oppose us in the Andromedae Wars. We survive," the collective replied, "and we remember. You will withdraw from this galaxy or face the same fate that befell your predecessors at the Battle of Spiral's End." The mention of that ancient battle sent shockwaves through the Voidborn fleet. For the first time in their species' history, they faced an enemy that not only remembered their defeats, but had the power to repeat them. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships deployed weapons that violated known physics, gravity lancers that could tear apart enemy vessels by manipulating space-time itself, quantum disruptors that erased matter from existence, and defensive systems that seemed to absorb enemy fire and convert it into pure energy. But the Voidborn were not defenseless. They had spent 2 million years perfecting their consumption techniques, learning to drain the life force from entire star systems to power their war machines. Their bioships adapted to human weapons with frightening speed, developing new defenses and countermeasures in real dash time. The turning point came when Swan Queen Nethes attempted her species' most desperate gambit. The massive flagship began to pulse with dark energy, and tendrils of void matter reached out toward nearby stars. She was trying to drain the energy from the Antaran sun itself, planning to use that power to overwhelm the human defenses. That's when humanity revealed the true extent of their transformation. The human dreadnought, at the center of the fleet, suddenly blazed with impossible radiance as it began to merge with its sister ships. One by one, the entire human fleet combined into a single massive construct, a ship that was less vessel than force of nature. "We are the memory of the dead," the collective voice intoned as the merged ship began to glow with the power of a dozen stars. "We are the promise to the living. We are the price of eternal vigilance." The weapon that emerged from the merged human fleet was beyond comprehension. It reached across dimensional barriers, striking not just at the void-born ships, but at the very essence of what they were. The dark energy that Swarm Queen Nethys had been gathering was torn from her control and turned back on her own forces. The void-born flagship, which had seemed indestructible, began to dissolve as its biomechanical systems turned on themselves. The smaller attack vessels tried to flee, but they found their escape routes blocked by human ships that had somehow anticipated their every move. Within minutes, the battle was over. The void-born fleet was utterly annihilated, their remains scattered across the Antaran system like cosmic debris. The planet below, which had been partially consumed, began to show signs of regeneration as human restoration. Technology reversed the damage, but the victory came at a cost that only other humans could truly understand. Commander Keth watched in amazement as the merged human fleet separated back into individual vessels. But she could see that something fundamental had changed. The ships moved differently now, more like extensions of a single will than independent. Vessels, Ambassador Chen, still aboard the Zephyrian diplomatic ship, seemed to age decades in the span of moments. "Each time we use our full power, we lose more of what we once were," he explained quietly. "We are becoming less individual, more collective. It is the price of the vigil we have chosen to maintain." "How long?" Dr. Vorax asked. "How long have you been fighting this battle?" "Since before your species learned to use fire," Chen replied. "Since before most of the current galactic civilizations even existed. We have been the guardians in the darkness, the watchers between the stars, and we will continue to be until the galaxy no longer needs our protection." The aftermath of the Battle of Antara, as historians would later call it, saw a complete transformation of galactic politics. The truth about humanity's nature spread quickly through the Alliance networks, carried by survivors who had witnessed the impossible. Some species reacted with fear, terrified of the power that had been hiding in their midst for millennia. Others felt betrayed, wondering how many other secrets humanity had kept. But most felt a profound sense of gratitude mixed with humbling awe. The Zephyrian Alliance formally requested an audience with human leadership, leading to the first true diplomatic contact between humanity and the galaxy in 12,000 years. The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a human vessel that had been constructed specifically for the occasion. Commander Kef, representing the Alliance, found herself face to face with beings who were simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. The human delegates looked like the traders and diplomats she had known, but their eyes held depths of experience that spanned geological ages. Asterisk, "We understand your concerns," said the lead delegate, introducing herself simply as Sarah. "You want to know what this means for the future of galactic civilization. You want to know if we will interfere in your affairs, if we will impose our will upon younger species." "Will you?" Keth asked directly. "We will do what we have always done," Sarah replied. "We will watch. We will wait. We will intervene only when threats emerge that you cannot handle alone. The galaxy belongs to the living, not to ancient guardians like ourselves. But you'll be there if something like the Voidborn comes again." Sarah's smile carried both sadness and infinite patience. Commander, the Voidborn were just one threat among many. In the spaces between galaxies, there are things that make them look like children playing with toys. Yes, we will be there. We will always be there. It is our burden and our purpose. As the diplomatic vessel departed, leaving the Alliance delegation to contemplate this new reality, monitoring stations across the galaxy detected a fascinating phenomenon. Human installations that had revealed themselves during the crisis were once again fading from sensors, becoming invisible to conventional detection methods. But now, those who knew how to look could see the subtle signs, the irregular asteroid formations, the nebulae that moved against stellar winds, the dark matter concentrations that followed patterns too precise to be natural. Humanity had returned to their eternal vigil, but now the galaxy knew they were there. And somehow, that knowledge made the vast darkness of space seem a little less frightening. In the years that followed, strange stories would spread through the space lanes, tales of ships in distress, finding unexpected rescue from vessels that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Reports of pirate fleets that simply disappeared overnight, leaving behind only empty ships and confused survivors. Sightings of impossible phenomena during natural disasters, mysterious energy signatures that seemed to minimize damage and save lives. The children of the galaxy went about their lives, building their civilizations, exploring new worlds, and reaching for the stars. But they were no longer alone in the darkness. Ancient guardians watched over them, patient and eternal, ready to stand between their charges and whatever horrors might emerge from the void. And in the deepest reaches of space, where no living thing should be able to survive, human ships continued their endless patrol. They carried with them the memory of all the species they had failed to save, and the determination to ensure that such failures never happened again. The vigil continued. The Guardians watched, and the galaxy lived on, protected by those who had chosen to sacrifice everything for the promise of tomorrow.